how do you move from going from once per year tax engagements to a fractional controllership role? Here's our 3-step roadmap, and it starts with the once a year tax work, obviously, moves into what I call ongoing tax planning. And I just want to be clear there, that doesn't mean that you're doing full tax projects, once per month. It's more of regular meetups with clients just to see where they're going and what you might be able to do with them in a proactive sense, as opposed to doing it after the fact. That then can be parlayed into recurring cash flow forecasting. It ties nicely in with those meeting points, the touch points that you're having during ongoing tax planning, which then, as the client grows or as you see fit, you can move that into a outsourced fractional controllership role. So those are the steps that we're going to be walking through, and let's get going on that. So step 1 with ongoing tax planning. Annual tax engagements are often completed after the business year end occurs, and that typically means that there's sometimes missed opportunities that could be planned during the actual year as they occur. So a great first step towards ongoing fractional controllership is to provide ongoing tax planning support as the year actually progresses. So this can be simple monthly or quarterly touch points where you have meetings with your client. You review their financial picture, review their future operations, their business plans, their goals, and you assess if there could be anything that you could do or put in place prior to the year end. So while it's more involved than traditional tax preparation, where you just collect all the documentation and process, there's a lot more value being provided to the client, and a lot more engagement and relationship building is occurring. And that means that greater fees not only can be charged, but should be charged and are probably being expected by your client. So again, I'm up here in Canada, Calgary, Canada, and using local examples here, typical practitioners charge anywhere between $750 to $1,250 for year-end returns for small businesses. But what we find is once they move to ongoing tax planning engagements, monthly fixed fee prices, it's not uncommon to see prices of $150 to $250 per month, which is basically doubling that charge. So you're moving up to around $2,000 per year on tax returns. So even though the price has doubled, the effort actually hasn't doubled. Again, you're only having meetings with these people. You're not actually going through full engagements or anything like that. You're simply talking to them, engaging with them, communicating with them to see if there's anything that could be done. And so your effort's probably only about 50% greater, even though your revenues have doubled. So lots of opportunity there to make more money, and that probably sounds terrible, but the reality is that you're actually providing a better service for your clients, something that they desire. It's proactive tax planning.
Kelvin,
so having
sorry, just wanted to actually jump in and maybe just kind of take another step. Like what are the, like, how do those conversations go from your experience, like from the client's perspective? Like, are they usually receptive to that, or what's the feedback usually from them?
Yeah, 100%. From our perspective, we're continually engaged in fractional controllership, fractional CFO type services. So it's a great question to ask, because those meetings are kind of normal for us. But typically we find that the reason people come to us are that they're getting just the bare minimum from their existing practitioners, and they want more. They want somebody that will sit down and talk with them and say, hey, are you buying any trucks in the next 6 months? What are your business goals? How are you going to grow? Because if you are growing in a certain way, or buying certain equipment, or spending money on certain things, are there things that we could do from a tax perspective to help save you tax dollars or optimize things more proactively? We typically find that clients want to have those discussions. They're not opposed to it at all. And so once you provide that to them, they're very receptive to what I would say the price change would be, because they're getting a completely different service. Even though it's just simply talking, it is viewed as a completely different service from the client's perspective, because they're getting that proactive advice as opposed to the reactive advice. And that simple shift in mindset is actually quite valuable from the client's perspective, we found. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's great. Love the context on that.
So if you have that proactive, ongoing tax planning process in place, it's really easy to progress that into cash flow forecasting services. And the reason for that is because you're meeting with your client on an ongoing basis, you're discussing their future plans, their future business operations, and it's a natural extension for them, your client, to physically want financial models around those future plans and ideas. It would help them get assurance around the fact that their future course is actually feasible given and reasonable given their current financial position. And so it's really a nice, easy, small, natural step to go from tax services once per year to ongoing touch points. Again, quarterly is even a great starting point, to then financial modeling out the decision-making process for the client. Again, back to your point, Tyler, they're very receptive to that. It's what they want. They truly want financial partners to help them manage their business, and it's highly in demand. So one thing to talk about here is that tax season actually is a great opportunity to propose this service to existing clients, as they're highly engaged with you already. They're talking to you quite a bit right now. And you should have, I know that's not always the case, but for a number of your clients, you should have a lot of clean and up-to-date data to start with. And that's really important with forecasting because, again, garbage in, garbage out. If the data quality is bad, you're not going to have a good forecasting experience. Your client also is likely in the mindset of planning for the future right now during tax season. Even if it's subconscious, they're looking at their financials a lot more, working with you. And so they're thinking about their financial position as a business person, much more so than they normally are. Talking about fees for cash flow forecasting, that's a question that we get a lot. It's quite affordable for your clients given the value that they get, as well as rewarding for you from an economic standpoint. Again, keep in mind that if you're doing the progression that we're talking about, the 3 steps, you're having regular meetings with your client already. It's really just fact-finding, discovery conversations, relationship building. But that information that you're gaining is exactly what you need to put into a forecast, because you're talking about their future life and where they're going and want to do. So they're already paying for the input of your forecast. So if you're using automated tools, you can actually get your effort to a pretty good point where it's probably less work than you're going to do on the actual tax planning side of things. And the client fees, looking at the other side of the equation, could be similar to what you're charging, if not higher, depending on how you're pricing and how you want to strategically do that. But the value being provided to the client is about the same, if not more, because again, you're actively managing and progressing their success. Their perceived value is quite high. So if you want to look at it from that perspective, going back to our tax planning example, you're probably doubling your fees with, not the same increase in effort. You would probably look to have around the same metrics here, where you're earning, say, $200 a month for a smaller engagement and the same amount of effort, so if not less. So your margins should actually be higher than they are on the tax planning side. And again, incremental steps, incremental changes to the client side in terms of pricing, but really big steps in terms of the value. So the value equation is really there. So we talked about moving from ongoing tax planning to cash flow forecasting services. Those actually transition extremely nicely into what we call outsourced or fractional controllership services. In providing fractional controllership services, we touched on it kind of at the start. You're essentially ensuring that there's enough cash in the till for your client at all times. So you're monitoring accounts receivable and incoming deposits, and you're monitoring accounts payable and outgoing spending for a large part of your role. And so really, when you think about it, this is just a much more actively involved version of cash flow forecasting, which is why we often refer to it as cash management. This becomes more important as a client grows in size, because this portion of their business can become quite burdensome and stressful to them. And because you are already providing tax and forecasting services to them, likely on an ongoing basis at this point, you can naturally take over this burden by being more actively involved with what you're doing. Keep in mind that when we talk about the word burden here, we're actually speaking from the position of the business owner. Finances are not that strong suit. That's why they hired you. So what is stressful and burdensome to them is just part of the typical day for you. In fact, myself, I actually quite like that kind of stuff. Point here is that it won't be burdensome for you. So I just want to use that that term a little loosely. And because we're talking about taking over a true controllership function within your client's business, like becoming actively more so involved with it, the fees are going to be higher on an ongoing basis. So again, looking at typical local examples here, most fractional controllership positions start at $1,000 to $1,500 per month, and they can quickly grow to be multiples of that. And the reason that the fees can get so high is because these services are geared for larger or growing small businesses. These businesses typically have multiple employees, their spending's growing, and is likely at $500,000 or much more and growing. So the competition for these fees are actually the real cost of these businesses hiring full-time staff members, if not one person, even multiple people. So when you're looking from the client's perspective, the cost of hiring one person, even a controller level person here in Canada, would be anywhere between $80,000 to $120,000, and that's without including benefits, insurance, training, management, vacations, all of that kind of stuff. So once you consider those parameters from a client's perspective, the cost of in-house controllership becomes quite prohibitive. And so, that presents a really good opportunity for someone like yourself that's already providing recurring, ongoing tax planning, tax advice, as well as forecasting services. It's just a question of if you want to become a little more involved and put a little more time into your clients' businesses. So what do clients actually get from controllership services? Well, it kind of ties back to our 27 days cash buffer that we were talking about at the outset. I'll throw out a few other stats for you. I love these stats. We talk about them all the time here at Helm. 80% of all businesses fail over 10 years. It's a pretty grim stat. Most of you have probably heard that. Some of the ones that you probably haven't heard, though, is that 60% of business failures are actually profitable, which is pretty scary. It goes to show that cash management is a real core issue for businesses out there. People do need help with it. Even if you're profitable and growing, you can still run into cash flow problems. 70% of all business owners stress out about cash flow at some point. So again, it just goes to show how pervasive it is for all businesses out there. And that's just the simple reality. If you look back at the 27 days of cash buffer, the reality is that most small businesses out there, again, 80% of that business market runs very lean as they start and as they grow. They're just in a constant state of stress. And so controllership services solve and speak directly to this pain. Implementing these services, planning and execution of those plans, you can help your client build out cash plans where you can build up that cash buffer. You can get it up to 90 days or more, a position where things can go sideways, COVID can happen, and they're still okay. You can help them streamline their sales and collections process, as well as the payables and expense processes. That helps with their cash conversion cycle, which means they get paid faster, their cash flow improves. As you work through the controllership process, you can improve their working capital, which helps their short-term loan covenants. And of course, you can reduce some of the workload that they do, the actual client, in terms of taking over things like bill payments. That's why we team up with Veeam. It speaks directly to that. It is a core function of controllership services. And so the end benefit of the client is that you basically improve the general foundation of the business itself. So not only are you taking their stress away, but you're taking it away because you're improving that core cash position of that company. And as you improve that cash position and take that severe stress away from them, you'll become indispensable. We spoke to that at the beginning. That's how you become an indispensable piece of their company. And again, you can't really put a value on that from a client's perspective. If you can help them attain any of those targets using cash flow forecasting, cash management, bill payment management, you will become a core cog within their business structure.